Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom lakam, which is peace unto you all. Ayawam tawab la atam za yakam yawam an chagadol Charlotte, which is good day. This is your brother Yawam from the GMS camp in Charlotte. Nachamatam kaya hamalakat hashamayim kwara. Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Call halayim la la banawa Yahweh bahasham Yahweh shai bahasham rocha kodash. Wamashan Allah zapanim nawa wamala akem sharoch chagadol, which is our praises to our Father Yahweh, which means He exists. Bahasham, in the name Yahweh Shai, delivers and double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone. Za'ayawab, this is Job chapter 5, and we'll give verse 2. And it says, For wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slayeth the silly one. I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I curse his habitation. And essentially, that ultimate, foolish man being Esau Edom. All right, running back from the top, it says, For wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slayeth the silly one. And then, you also have 2/3 of Jake that will essentially ascribe after the lifestyles of Esau Edom, and they will also be foolish by default as well. But continuing on, it says, For wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slayeth the silly one. I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I curse his habitation, which chiefly goes into Esau Edom. See, because on this side, he has essentially taken root. All right, let's get this word for root. It should be sharash. And it says sharash. It says H8327. It says it says take root, deal with roots. It says to cause to take root. All right. It says to strike into the soil, and essentially when something is stricken into soil, all right, it essentially is established. It has a set place, for whatever amount of time. This is Ayawab, Job chapter 9 and verse 24, and it says, the earth is given into the hand of the wicked. He covereth the faces of the judges thereof, if not where, and who is he? So the one that has power over the planet Earth at this present time, all right, is Esau Edom, the so-called white man, all right, which I say so-called because, Esau has, over time, changed the identities of, different sets of people, chiefly Jake, all right, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indians, Haitians, Israelite foreigners, all right, and also he has changing the identity of himself, literally, he's changed himself into the so-called white man, all right, and so-called because his skin is red, you see, but then also in history, and well, more specifically in his media, whether it be movies or people have the connotation of the Egyptians being so-called white people, due to Esau placing himself like in different movies and different shows and stuff like that. They had the connotation that these ancient kingdoms was Edomites, but they weren't. All right, and that was the occasion for that was for deception. Esau has painted himself as different people, you see. But then also going back to this right here, Job 9:24, the earth is given to the hand of the wicked, he covered the faces of the judges thereof, if not where and who is he? So ultimately going into a time period of iconoclasm and the Renaissance, which the icons, all right, being the Most High Yahweh, his son Yahweh Shai, all right, and the Israelites, all right, those are the judges mentioned in this verse right here, Job 9:24. You see, but just going back to the point that Esau has done that as a means to deceive, all right, and put himself as the judges of the earth when indeed it is the Israelites, all right, under the Most High Yahweh Bahasham Yahweh Shai, all right, but nevertheless, continuing on, the wicked have taken root. All right, and that's essentially the position they have been given on this side. The Lord deals with balance. All right, which that balance is, the nations had their opportunity to essentially rule. All right, and we'll rule in the kingdom. All right, so let's go back to Job chapter 5, and we'll get verse 3. It says, I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I curse his habitation. It says, his children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them. All right, let's get a quick precept. Because the wicked have taken root. This is Tahoyam, Psalms chapter 37, and we'll get verse 35. And it says, I have seen the wicked in great power and spreading himself like a green bay tree. All right, and the wicked, the so-called white man has spread himself. He has embassies and different diplomacies in different countries around the world. All right, he has taken great power. Essentially the wicked has root. all right, in this planet Earth. The earth is given into the hand of the wicked. They ultimately have the power and say so upon the planet Earth, on the left hand side, just because of the position that the Lord has given them. But continuing on, let's get Proverbs chapter 29, and we'll get verse 16, because by default, they have the power, you see, but then, being that they have the power, they essentially can make the laws and legislations, all right, and being that they can do that, sin's going to be, lurking everywhere. This is Mashal Yah, Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 16. It says, when the wicked are multiplied, transgression increaseth, but the righteous shall see their fall. Being that the wicked is multiplied, because ultimately, their lifestyles and ideologies are traveling amongst the globe, and transgression is increasing. We're seeing transgression, we're seeing wickedness increase because of the so-called white man. It says, but the righteous shall see their fall. And which the scriptures say, let's get that real fast, because this is the reason that, this is the reason that transgression is increasing. This is Bon Sirach, chapter 10. We'll get verse 1. It says, a wise judge will instruct his people, and the government of a prudent man is well ordered. It says, as the judge of the people is himself, so are his officers, and what manner of man the ruler of the city is, such are all they that dwell therein. So going back to Proverbs 29 and 16, it says, when the wicked are multiplied, transgression increaseth, but the righteous shall see their fall. And essentially everybody's under a wicked vibration because of who is in rulership. All right, the so-called white man has the power of the globe right now. All right, they have taken root, so essentially their ideologies, their lifestyles, all right, their ways of life is what's going to be on the minds of the people. All right, so let's get a couple more. Let's get Psalms chapter 73. Just going into this topic, Psalm 73 and verse 3. All right, going back to Job 5 and 22, or 5 and 2. And it says, for wrath killeth the foolish man, and envy slayeth the silly one. It says, I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I curse his habitation. The foolish have taken root. The chief foolish one has taken root, Esau, Edom. It says, his children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them. And that was Job 5 and 2 to verse 4. All right, because it says, his children are far from safety. The scriptures say this right here, and I'm going to go back to that. But this is this is Job chapter 27 and verse 14. And it says, if his children be multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. So starting from verse 13, Job 27 and 13, it says, this is the portion of a wicked man with the Most High, and the heritage of oppressors, which shall receive of the Almighty. If his children be multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. Reading it again, verse 14. If his children be multiplied, it is for the sword, and his offspring shall not be satisfied with bread. So it's talking about a wicked man, that chief wicked man being Esau, Edom. His children isn't going to be multiplied. If his children is multiplied, it's for the sword. So going back to Job 5 and verse 3, it says, I have seen the foolish taking root, but suddenly I curse his habitation. It says, his children are far from safety, and they are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them. So his children is far from safety, you see, because if they're multiplied, it's for the sword. Those that is not destroyed, by the ICBM nukes. All right, when the nukes essentially pelt this place, they're going to be rounded up for slavery, So they are far from safety on this side. They have abundance. They have prosperity. In the kingdom, the roles is going to reverse. They're going to have the short end of the stick, you see, because going back to, we got Psalms chapter 37 and, what was that, verse 35? And it says, it was Proverbs 29 and 16. It says, when the wicked are multiplied, transgression increases. And that's because reason why transgression is increasing is because the wicked is in prosperity. What's on their mind is wickedness, essentially having competition on who can be the most wicked. That's what we see 2/3 of Jake doing. But verse 18 in the latter, or verse 16 in the latter says, but the righteous shall see their fall, because going into Ecclesiastes, the 8th chapter, from verse 10 to, let's actually get it. This is this is Ecclesiastes chapter 8, and we'll get verse 11, and it says, because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. So being that Esau Edom isn't being judged currently, He continues to do wickedness. So their mindset is to continue to do wickedness. But to them, that seems as prosperity. And 2/3 of Jake, they take on that same ideology. So little do they know that, it's going to be a tab that has to be paid at the end of the night. All right, verse 12, it says, verse 11, it says, though a sinner do evil 100 times and his days be prolonged, yet surely I know that it shall be well with him that fear the Most High, which fear before him. Because ultimately, all right, they're going to be judged. All right, going back to verse 12, verse 13, it says, but it shall not be well with the wicked, neither shall he prolong his days, which are as a shadow, because he feareth not before the Most High. Hey, and same thing, in Job, the joy of the hypocrite, but for a moment, you know. So it feels as if they're being very prosperous and they're succeeding, you see. But in the end, ultimately, they're going to be destroyed. That's why it says, "But the righteous shall see their fall," and we're witnessing the downfall of our enemies. Our Proverbs 29:16, it says, "When the wicked are multiplied, transgression increases, but the righteous shall see their fall." We're seeing the fall of Esau, Edom. We're seeing the fall of 2/3 of Jake. Are we seeing the downfall of those in the spirit of the world? All right. So I'm gonna get one more, and that'll be it. But this is Psalms. This is Psalms chapter. Well, actually, let me get this too. Reading down to Job 5 and verse 4, and it says, "His children are far from safety. His children are far from safety. They are crushed in the gate. Neither is there any to deliver them." Let's get Jeremiah. Let's get Jeremiah chapter. Look at Jeremiah chapter 12 and verse 1. It says, "Righteous art thou, O Lord, and I plead with thee. Yet let me talk with thee of thy judgments. Wherefore doeth the way of the wicked prosper? Wherefore are all they happy that deal very treacherously?" And that goes back to the thought of the prosperity of the wicked. How they're not judged right on sight. But that reason is because they're ultimately they're building up a tab, all right, for a future judgment, which is going to be a very great judgment. It's going to be a great destruction. All right. Verse 2, it says, "Thou hast planted them, yet they have taken root. They grow, yet they bring forth fruit. Thou art near in their mouth and far from their reins." And ultimately, the wicked is ultimately planted. All right. And those that essentially derive from that wicked lineage, it's for the sword, like we got in Job 27 and verse 14. All right. So let's get this as well. Let's get Psalms chapter 92. And we'll give verse 7, and it says, "When the wicked spring as the grass, and when all the workers of iniquity do flourish, is that they shall be destroyed forever." Hey, and it says it plain as day, when the wicked spring as the grass, we got Psalms 37 and 35, the wicked has spread himself like a green bay tree. We got Proverbs 29 and 16. When the wicked are increased, transgression increased, roughly paraphrasing. All right, so being that the ideologies and the wicked are essentially multiplying, all that is increasing. All right, and essentially those that are under the rulership of this man, they're going to take on the same ways, other than the elect. All right, but essentially it's going to be a tab that has to be paid by Esau Edom. The Lord requires that which is past. Ecclesiastes 3 and 15. So again, this man has a great judgment ahead of him. That's what he has to look forward to. And those that want to follow after him, hey, they're going to be destroyed too. So let's get one more. Let's get Psalms chapter 73. Because Esau isn't going to go away scot-free. But this is Thahoyam, Psalm 73. And we'll get verse 3. It says, "For I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." And that prosperity goes into security. All right, and that security, all right, it has it's a limited security. It's not a true sense of security, you see, because what's keeping them secure is an illusion. All right, it goes along with the social constructs and the societal norms of the ones that essentially set this up, and those that essentially live after those things, you see. But when righteousness is in effect, which righteousness is in effect currently, the scriptures say that the knowledge of the glory of the Lord shall cover the earth as it does the sea. So as this truth is going out, righteousness is in. All right, and the time period, or the time period that essentially the wicked got to rule, that is diminishing, you see. So it's coming up into the time of the point to where, those that are living wicked lifestyles, they're about to be judged for it. All right. Psalm 73:3, it says, "For I was envious at the foolish when I saw the prosperity of the wicked." That prosperity going into, those false sense of benefits. All right. It says, because right now it looks like they're winning. All right. Or at a certain period of time, it looked like they're winning, but we're seeing, their judgment come closer and closer, to those that it's meant for. All right. But it says, Verse 4 says, "For there are no bands in their death, but their strength is firm." Their strength is firm, going back to the societal norms of those that follow Esau Edom, but chiefly Esau Edom, you see, because the earth was given into the hand of the wicked. It says, verse 5, it says, "They are not in trouble as other men, neither are they plagued like other men." And this is ultimately Esau Edom, you see, because he's the one that writes the laws, and he's the one that is able to, get around it, because he's the one that made it up, Verse 6, it says, "Therefore pride compasseth them about as a chain." It says, "And violence covered them as a garment." They're very prideful. All right, and they use violence as a means to get to whatever they need or they want, because he was given that great sword as pursuant to in Genesis. But it says, verse 7, it says, "Their eyes stand out with fatness. They have more than the heart could wish." They got the fatness of the earth. All right, the so-called white man has the fatness of the earth. All right, verse 8, "They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily." If you told if the topic of slavery was brought out to a Edomite, they say, "Hey, get over it." All right. Verse 8, it says, "They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression." That's them speaking wickedly, you see, because that's not a just. That wouldn't be a just representation of what someone would say as to what occurred to Jake. All right. It says they are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression, which we went off, or we sinned against the Lord, so it's rightful that we were placed upon this position, you see. But Esau's part to play in the matter, all right, was not just, you see. So their mindset is to speak wickedly concerning oppression, because they took that upon themselves, all right, to do everything that they did. All right, and just because of that, they don't have a leg to stand on, so they shouldn't even be speaking. That's why it says, "And speak wickedly concerning oppression," because they don't have a leg to stand on themselves. All right, Psalm 73:8 says, "They are corrupt and speak wickedly concerning oppression. They speak loftily." They speak boastfully. They speak arrogant. As if they're the ones that's running the show. All right, and a good example of that was, the scriptures tell us to not put anything into our bodies, you see, but Esau will push, "Hey, you should do this, or you should do that." All right. And that's their way of putting themselves, all right, before the scriptures. All right. When we got a good example of that, all right, during the time of the 19 Charlie, 19C. Verse 9, it says, "They set their mouth against the heavens, and their tongue walketh through the earth." And they set their mouth against the heavens, through blasphemy, because they continually blaspheme the Lord. And it says their tongue walketh through the earth, so their tongue are their ideologies, are their lifestyles, and the stuff that they're about, their mindset goes throughout the earth. And that's essentially why we see transgression increasing, as we got in Proverbs 29:16, you see. But contrary to popular belief and thought, hey, they're going to be judged for that, because let me get this, and I'm going to go ahead and close. But this is Quahalat Ecclesiastes chapter 3 and verse 15. And it says, "The thing that which hath been is now, and that which is to be hath already been, and the Most High required that which is past." And the Lord requiring that which is past goes into that righteous inquisition, So it's a trial. They're pretty much being put on trial, and those that want to be attached to them, well, they on trial too, and they're going to be judged according to their works and their deeds, So, just wanted to go into that. Adaranta Zaba Zabanaya Palos, that was a beautiful edification through the spirit. Wadaranta Za Atam Yashya Wamta Wab, Lord's will. You have a good day. Wa Shalom Lakam, which is peace and Tiwa. Shalom, Shalom.